that issue of humanity that Francois started and then Selena picked up on there, really, really important. There's a lot of technology around, but we need to remember the humanity side at the end of it. And finally, in terms of our expert witnesses, contributors, I'm so delighted to welcome you, Christopher Patno from Google. I think your title is something like Head of Accessibility and Digital Inclusion within Google. Obviously, you've been referred to in many of the references already. And thank you for getting up early on the West Coast. Next time you might not be so early, well, if you're going to move to us. We'd love to hear your perspective. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Chris, and the rest of the folks at ABF for the opportunity to participate. And thank you to all of the other panelists. I've been really inspired by your wisdom and your insights. And I have to say, this morning I had a shower thought. So what I'm going to be sharing today is mostly extemporaneous. I changed what I wanted to talk about based off of what I thought of this morning. What occurred to me is that we have a parallel in the shift of the medical model of accessibility to the social model of accessibility and technology. Those people who don't know, the medical model of accessibility is that disability is something that needs to be fixed. The social model is that the disability can be accommodated. So it seems to me that there's a parallel in the medical model of dedicated AT to the social model of mobile devices, where the dedicated AT is a piece of hardware that's made to fix something, and the social model is an accommodation device. And so taking this one step farther, this reminds me of the movie The Incredibles from Pixar, where the character Syndrome said, if everybody's super, no one is. Which means to me, if everyone is using AT, like speech to text, ASR, and captions, it's no longer AT, it's just technology. So my proposal is that, like the old expression about 10 years ago about cell phone cameras, the best AT is the one that you have with you. Mobile devices can interpret the world around you, both digital and physical, using innovative technologies like AI, artificial intelligence, computer vision, and machine learning. But, and this is something that occurred to me while I was listening to the conversation today, there's a balance of compute versus cost, especially when you start looking at emerging markets, that needs to be managed. Less expensive phones can do less because their processors are smaller or older than more expensive and more powerful phones. So that's where you have a solution like cloud computing that, like Francis mentioned. Here, cloud compute can help. An example of this from Google is Live Transcribe. Live Transcribe is an application on Android that can literally transcribe over 80 different languages in real time. You can type your responses, and we can even provide sound notifications of your name being spoken or of environmental sounds happening around you, like a dog barking or a baby crying. And these are made possible because of the power of cloud compute. And as an aside, what's cool for me about this is that this is actually started as a project between two people, one person who was deaf and one person who was hearing, who wanted to work together. So you have this extremely exciting technology like AI and automatic software recognition, automatic speech recognition. Sorry, I've been up since 5 o'clock this morning. You have ASR and empower these opportunities where you can't get a live captioner. So you have this technology powered by the cloud that helps people. So since cloud computing can give access to more powerful models, it allows cheaper phones to do amazing things. But it requires a data connection, which isn't always readily available. So what's exciting here is the recent advances of the miniaturization of machine learning models so they can run on device, like what Hector called the edge. And this allows more powerful phones to do more in a local and private way. But you still can't do as much as you could with the cloud. So here's that balance between powerful phones doing more, but less powerful phones doing even more, but you have to have a data connection. So an example of this coming from Google is live caption. This is a feature on Android that will provide captions for you on almost anything on your device. That if it doesn't have captions, we can provide captions for you as a system setting, as a system feature. And these, again, these captions are processed locally on the edges, as Hector called out. And what we did is we took lessons from Live Transcribe of what was important and what people wanted to do. And based off that feedback, we created this new feature. And because of working with the community, we have expanded this functionality just from content like Instagram video or TikToks to phone calls. So now you can actually use live caption on phone calls, and people can have there's a fellow by the name of Matthew Johnson at ThoughtWorks out of the UK. He posted a really great posting about how he had his first phone call with his son because of live caption, because he could read what his son was saying, and he was verbal, so he could speak back, and they had a real conversation. For me, this is the powerful thing that technology can provide. And we have also an application called Lookout, which uses computer vision to describe text, banknotes, and the world around you for people with vision difficulties. And this is a combination of both cloud and compute. So some things will be powered by the cloud, and some things will be done locally. So we're trying to find that balance of where the best functionality can be. And in all honesty, there's no right answer. There's no perfect answer, because one person's need is different than another person's need. So you can't create a technology that meets everyone's need. The only way you can do something that meets the most of people's needs is to do it together. You build with the community, you co-design with the community. In fact, the best way to do it is actually, as Hector mentioned, you have people on the team building the products. If that's not possible, then you co-design with the community. You test with the community, you take feedback from the community and feed this in. And when you do this, you can create technology that meets the needs of everyone. So in closing, and I apologize if this has been a bit rambling, technology is a really empowering force, but the requirements that needs to be balanced to make the most robust experience. You need to understand the cost versus compute versus privacy. You need to understand that there's no one perfect solution that meets everybody's needs. But technology can make these things happen. Technology can solve these things, but it has to be built alongside the community. So together we can create the future, but by being inclusive and intentional, we can create the future for all.
Thank you very much indeed, Christopher. In fact, as you're talking there, and I think this theme has come out sort of throughout all of the sessions about, your technology is great, but there's got to be the human element, as Francois called it, the humanity. One of my favorite apps as a blind person is Be My Eyes, where I was in a hotel room in China and used Be My Eyes to connect to a volunteer who used the camera on my phone to look at the air conditioning controls and help me reset it where I couldn't get help locally. So I think that there is a fantastic blend of technology and humanity, which will allow us to do that. And I think, Gio, it comes back to you and your captioning, where actually the best captioning is done as we're seeing now, done by a human with that sort of skill set. And as the technology improves and as AI improves and we build more and more into those systems, then that can get better and better and better. So I think we're at a stage of this where, yes, we've talked about the stakeholders, and now we're talking about the future. I think, I suspect we're getting nearer to 2/3 glass full rather than half full, half empty. So, but that's perhaps why we're all on the call today and having that more positive approach. Dario, you're joining me for the questions for this illustrious panel, and obviously we can't get contribution from Larry or Francois or Selena, but they've given us some great food for thought. Do we have any additional questions at the moment, Dario?
Well, I have to say that Neil has done some great work. He has answered a lot of the questions that we still have there. Meanwhile, we'll come back to some of them. And there's one that just came through. So I will read from David Wallace, and I will read in a bridge version, pretty much. How can all media services, referring to the UK, BBC, ITV, big broadcasters, be persuaded to include progress in disability as a major strategic step? Is that something you would like to take?
Well, it's a encouraging. I think it was referred to early on, wasn't it, with the stick and the carrot. You know, is it the stick of regulation or the carrot of the service, the experience that people have? I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question. I don't know whether any of our previous panelists, whether Robin or anyone would like to come in as well.
Sure, happy to, Chris, on at least some of it. So, I mean, I think the answer is that there's not enough yet, but that we're seeing more. We're seeing broader representation. We're seeing better representation, you know, coming out of the BBC for sure, which is another valuable 500 organization. But we were passing around internally within our team yesterday. Channel 4, UK's Channel 4, has put out a brilliant video highlighting the Paralympic Games in Tokyo that shows disability in a way that you need to see it. I'll put the link in the chat after we're done. But you know, as far as talking about representation, there's Valuable 500 undertakes a global trends report that comes out quarterly that we do in conjunction with Mintel to talk about what we're seeing from the past quarter. And this is only for our membership, but to give some insight out to the group today on the event. What we saw out of the last quarter is a greater volume of representation, specifically coming from the beauty and fashion industry, or who are using disability to storytell about what it means, using individuals with disabilities. You know, Sinead Burke joined as one of the first, or the first individual with disabilities as an editor at Vogue, and is writing a line for them. I mean, we're starting to see more representation. It just needs to move more quickly, and we know that.
It's fascinating. So Channel 4, if people get the chance to watch it, there is I can't remember the guy's name now. He's an Australian guy who's an amputee, and he runs a show called The Last Leg, and that's part of the Olympic coverage. So Channel 4 has done a fantastic job by getting disabled people to present. I know there's also issues around representation of disabled people in programming that we come across. There's also the issue, of course, around encouraging, to go back to the captioning and audio description side, that we get a lot more audio described content. So I think it's permeating around many more aspects of the industry. Gio, from your point of view, the technology, you touched upon it in your presentation, but you know, where does it stop? You know, you mentioned the sort of simultaneous automatic translation, language to language. You know, where does this go? I mean, is there any end to it?
I don't think there's end to it. I think as long as there's a demand for accessibility, there's going to be future innovations. I think in general, the thing that I've seen that's the most interesting to me is in virtual reality. And you know, there's even platforms now like Altspace VR where you're able to, you know, literally have spaces where you can actually speak to people in other languages, right? And converse with just one person while other people are conversing with other people. So looking at it in the 3D space, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge to resolve as we move forward with technology.
I think Larry touched upon this in his little speech, didn't he? That, you know, this notion of 360, and yes, what we're developing in the gaming and the VR world is going to be applicable as we extend that. And in fact, I noticed obviously during lockdown in my technology sort of telecom industry analyst role, we've been subjected to endless webinars and endless content. And I've noticed how many more of them now are capturing the video content because they want to be inclusive with the video, but they're also taking that feed and automatically generating the text from it, because of course that it's valuable content, you know, and we shouldn't lose sight of, you know, when we're doing events like this, especially with your captioning you've provided, that actually that content becomes consumable in different ways. You know, this beauty of the digitization of media is that we will enjoy different ways of consuming it. I'm a massive audiobook fan, for example. I much prefer having someone read it to me, a human read it to me, because I spend all day listening to my computer jabbering away at me in that sort of compute to human type voice that is prevalent now on mobile devices and on laptops. So yeah, I think that notion of media, but I think what's important here is that we're beginning to see so many different elements. So we initially in early research focused on how do we define disability, how do we segment it, what's the technology, and now we're seeing this much more wide-ranging issue that comes down from every aspect of our lives. And Christopher, from a Google point of view, just some of the things coming down the line. I know you can't tell us about the newer technology, but which aspects of I guess even the broader Alphabet group, as well as Google, and the assistive technology and accessibility are you most excited about?
I have to say, I'm really excited these days about what we call Project Euphonia. And it's a technology that will allow people with non-typical speech patterns to be able to use voice technology, use in our case, the Google Assistant, but it's the same technology that powers Siri and Alexas. And what's really exciting to me, it's we're taking this Euphonia technology, this broad speech model and voice models, and allowing it to create voices for people who cannot speak. So there's a fellow by the name of Steve Gleason out here in the US and we just recently had a commercial where we actually had him, a recreated version of his voice in the commercial, reciting something about the Lou Gehrig's disease. And it was a really emotional and powerful thing, hearing this man who hasn't spoken in a very, very long time, reading the words that were spoken by by Lou Gehrig, the person who ALS has been sort of nicknamed from. So this speech technology for me is really interesting and really powerful.
It's interesting, isn't it? In the original report, I looked at what was then the emerging market of wearables and how we can, I say, with the $6 million man, we can sort of rebuild someone, or we can enhance someone physically. Of course, we're also getting close to this, we believe, this notion of actually interpreting brainwave to be for people who have locked-in syndrome and the like. So yeah, once again, be able to literally give a voice to someone who is in a situation like that, both of course for learning medically, but also giving that person a much greater quality of life. Excellent.
So Chris,
please,
actually,
Neil.
We're not on the cusp. That's actually happening. So we've been talking with people like Natalia Kuzmina at MIT. They are already using brain-computer interfaces, and not embedded ones, but ones that are soft. So you wear a headset to enable people to control devices and to be able to communicate. So this is happening right now. And then and also there's another group which Larry, if he's here, would probably have told you about, which is called Cognition, who are also building BCI interfaces into headsets as well. So you've got brain-computer interfaces and basically assistive tech built into VR headsets. So it's here. It's just that the future is unevenly distributed, as they say. So I think it's really exciting to see this stuff. But I'm also really interested in not just augmented reality, but peri-reality. And
go on, tell me about
the idea
of
reduced reality, because there's someone that is overloaded, with all of the content and all of the sort of drinking from the fire hose, despite being addicted to Twitter. Because I can see Hector's eyebrows sort of raising here, because I'm a total media addict. It's actually, how do we filter? How do we deal with sense making? And actually allow ourselves the peace and the calm to live a healthy mental life as well, because actually there is this huge wave of anxiety that is spread, and it's not just COVID, it's the effects of the technology that we're using to cope with COVID. The always on, the connectedness, the multi-channel revolution and flood of information. So the ability to use technology to also reduce what we need to consume and help expand, help us there. And it needs to get more accurate. Microsoft have done a great job with things like filtered inbox. It's just that it filters the wrong things at the moment. The idea is fabulous. I'm sure that it will learn and get better, so that we can start sort of actually sorting out the digital wheat from the digital chaff. I think that's an area that I'm also super interested in, because for hidden disabilities and cognitive impairments, this would be really, really useful.
It's a really
If I can,
interesting. No, please go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, if, for the sake of other nerds in the audience, if I can share two other companies that have done some really neat stuff. One is called a BrainPort, which is a tongue sensor. You put a sensor on your tongue, and they have a camera on glasses. And what they've learned is that the brain can be reprogrammed to actually see using your tongue for the content of this camera. It provides a context of edges. And the demo that I saw that was so interesting is they had a person who was blind able to kick a what you call a football, what we call a soccer ball, on a field and walk along a track because it was able to find the edges so clearly. Second one is a company called Neosensory, which does they have created a bracelet that will essentially translate sounds into something that's tactile. So people who are deaf you can actually have someone, if you can train it to say your name, and you can be told when your name is called because your bracelet will go off. So these are some really neat technologies that sort of expand the context to your, Chris, to your point of the $6 million man. These are technologies that can enhance people's senses.
I think there was also, if I remember correctly, there was a climber, a blind climber, who had a haptic pad on his tongue, which actually showed him the shape of the rock above him as he was climbing. I think that was around a while ago. Sorry, I interrupted. I do beg your pardon.
I was going to say that, I mean, these are great user kind of facing technology that's, is being developed, but there is also, I think, the infrastructure technology like blockchain, right? I mean, right now, people relate blockchain as like a Bitcoin investment. But if you think about the foundation of blockchain is about building trust, between parties. And we also know that people with disabilities or also the aging population, fraud, for example, financial fraud could be a huge, huge issue. And I see a lot of potential innovation in this area. Potentially, we can really guard, to put it in more of a defensive play to make sure that our citizens and users are protected. Another use of a blockchain that I thought was really interesting was that people, a lot of times we use volunteer for this because we're talking about disability as a societal topic. So you want to enable the entire society. But when people volunteer their time, for example, to describe the environment and whatever, ideally, they should be paid if they choose to, for that effort. So using blockchain, one can identify the contribution of effort, and align with the infrastructure. So I see that there could be monetization potential to include even more participation from the society. So these are all fascinating technology that could be explored.
And that is interesting, isn't it? Because the notion of Be My Eyes is a purely voluntary service, and yet in the US you've got IRA. I think IRA exists in other places as well, where it's a paid for per minute as you get someone to help describe your way through an airport or something. So yeah, I think and because it's been delivered often through the third sector, through the charitable sector and those organizations. I think Francois described the many relationships they have with all the different disability associations. That's seen to be that charitable element. And what we've got to do is move away from that and make sure we see it as being part of the mainstream, supporting everyone in society. And the thing I was going to mention on the previous comment was, Neil, your Perry issue, that of course we're also seeing that in the way interfaces are designed. And I know personally, I prefer accessing things through my iPhone now with VoiceOver because there's less, dare I say it, guff on the screen, less clutter on the screen. No, clutter is the wrong word, but there's just less mess on the screen. And therefore it's easier from an accessibility point of view. So that simplification of the design interface is absolutely vital. And I think, and to your point, Neil, you're screening out so much of the irrelevant information, the extraneous information to make things work for you. Now, Dario, we have perhaps time for one very quick last question.
Well, in that case, there are so many that I wanted to pick back from the existing, but Sophie Ligo mentioned testing in the sense of should telecom companies and tech firms need to be accepted, tested by people with live disability. You could also extend it, who should be testing, device manufacturers, application developers, and so
That's
on. Lots.
Yeah, a really good point. And I don't know if Robin's still on, joining us, but certainly from my point, what I found fascinating in some of the preparation for the report, I was talking to some applications companies, and they said to me, well, accessibility is built into those mobile devices. We shouldn't need to worry about it, which was fascinating for me to hear that, because, so they were aware of it, but they weren't then thinking about how do they make sure that their applications work properly. And the issue, which I think this refers to, it goes back to Larry's 3 comments of shift left, born accessible and no regression. One of my pet hates, and another, Chris Mayer's a fellow blind person who's done a lot of tech work in his life. He's definitely a glass is half empty, because he gets so frustrated, especially when people refresh applications and then it's not as accessible anymore. So it's almost, giving accessibility is within your grasp and you get a great experience. And then because of a technology refresh, or perhaps we're even moving an application to the cloud and moving onto a different platform, suddenly it's not as accessible. So yes, testing, I think, is absolutely critical. I know in terms of I don't know whether, Christopher, you want to comment from a Google point of view on the Android front?
I think we have the expectation that the operating system and the platform itself should be accessible. That sort of table stakes. The really interesting thing is, what can you do on top of that to make things a delight to use? Things like live caption that we created with Android allows you to consume other people's content, even if it's not made accessible. Live transcribe makes the real world more accessible using our platform. I think the really interesting thing we have to look at, the Microsofts, the Apples, and the Googles, it's the platform's manufacturer's responsibility to make it possible for everything to be made accessible. And then it's up to us and the third-party application developers to make something that's delightful. And that's what makes these things really a pleasure to use.
And I think it's also fair to say, when you talk to apps developers and you talk to them about like you say, the delight it brings when these things are totally accessible, exposing new information sources, not just Twitter, but many other sources, describing video, that whole notion of describing content to people, or interpreting it, like you say, from a deaf person across different services. Absolutely fascinating.
Chris, this is Crosby. I think one thing that, all of this technology is so amazing and so fascinating. And, I think Hector made a statement earlier. It's about the niche moving to the mainstream. But a part of, Neil brought up the point earlier that we can't forget the data that we need, and the data that is outdated to drive all of this, the consumer base, the global population that's here, the disposable income numbers are woefully outdated. And so we need those pieces to come alongside this, so business has an easier conversation about why this is niche to mainstream.
That's true. Very good point. A very, very good point, Ian Crosby. Dario, I think we're approaching the time when you and I need to wrap this up and put some summary on the table and let everyone go back to their day jobs and carry on the good work. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to Christopher. Thank you, Crosby. Thank you, Gio, both for your contribution and, of course, for the captioning, and of course to Larry and Francois René, and of course Serena, who couldn't be with us. So Dario, should we put this to bed? How would you like to wrap it all up?
Well, I think given the level of energy so far from your speakers, there are many questions, at least I counted 14 there. Maybe we should keep until midnight local time. But it's actually, this was our first attempt to come here, and I would say for MEF was great to listen, to learn so much. I hope our members will take away so much, and we already got some fabulous feedback from some of our members. It might be that we will have a follow-on later. So please, to all of our speakers, we'll come back. We'll ask you for more as well. That's the first thing I'd like to say.
And I think some of the takeaways that we touched upon, which are really important, and obviously with the statistics that Crosby just touched upon, we need cleaner and clearer information across all of the areas. I think the other thing, and this is around innovation, and Mike Short touched upon it, is that actually getting people with the different disabilities involved in designing. We're moving into an era now where designing applications, designing services is, because being software centric, we can get people much more involved. Listening to the people within your own organization who might be consumers of the service. I think Francois made that point within Orange about how many, the percentage of people he has within the employee base and how they listen to those people. Because, we know that, Robin and I would say people with a vision impairment are probably the best to describe the way services should be evolved. And I think the same, Neil would be in agreement from the point of view of people with other disabilities. So I think that issue of making sure that we get everyone involved in designing and delivering. But I think the most important thing is about educating. And that's certainly the work the Valuable 500 has done about getting CXOs involved in this. And therefore that filter can come down from the very top. But more importantly, I think we talk about the digitally impoverished or digital poverty. I think that we have to find this framework within which we can identify how accessibility and people with the different disabilities can get access to the right education. I'm confident for the future because people coming through the education system now, whether if they already have a disability, they're already learning with a lot of the assistive technology. So people go through schools with iPads and tablets and the like, doing fantastic work. But I think for when people, if we want to say, I think the right word is acquire a disability later in life, or when aging people get a disability, one of the most often asked questions I get is, how can I get my elderly parents to listen to audiobooks? Because they used to love reading the newspaper or reading books. So I think that education piece is absolutely down to that touch point. Because of the industry we're in, we've touched upon a lot of the technology, all the way from the smartphone to the brainwave interpretation that Neil just introduced. We really need to be pragmatic about it. I think it was Francois René from Orange mentioned this about putting the ethnographic humanity, but observing the practical lives of people. And that's at home and in the workplace, but all of these things. And to all the points that have been made throughout, I think some fantastic comments. Having chaired it, it's impossible to have captured it all from my side. I know Mef will do a great job of capturing it, and I think Dario, we're going to put this up as so people can go back and watch it at their leisure to capture all those funny remarks and comments and jokes that we all popped in there. But I'd like to say first, a big thanks. First of all, to all of the speakers who've contributed either live or on video today. Thank you to Susan and Dario for doing a great job pulling it together. And Dario, I will leave the last word to you.
Well, thank you. So again, I'll start thanking you all again, and our sponsor with being ThinkWords to make it accessible today. But I would also say, first of all, some of the housekeepings, so much good things will not go to waste. We have, in case you missed or joined later, a full recording available, will be available on our website, but also the reports and the many things we collected throughout the day. We'll have a repository in there. So that if you want some of the reports, some of the things that have been mentioned today, you will find it there. And don't worry, we will send you an email, so you'll have a nice reminder in your inbox. I'm sure you will find it somewhere. Make sure you're attuned to our MEF emails in there. Now, and that's probably some of the housekeeping, just to say the thank you, and these will continue later. I should also probably apologize. I pushed this billion because I believe that you need to be counted to count sometimes. And in the market, to know that, and I heard it from Crosby, the 13-14% pretty match ups with that billion number there. So there are lots of people with disabilities, and Chris was saying, and it's a gray scale. It is a bit of a, increasing and decreasing number with your abilities itself. However, we probably make some generic statements. Somebody, I think Kim was saying there is something to do in the developing world, and that's definitely true. And there are differences between the different markets, and probably the different the B2C, the B2B, the G2C, etc. All the different markets and segments you can think of, we should all apply. So we probably try to go for the big number right now, but later on it would be nice to see if we can understand for you as well a bit more of these differences and specific on what can be done in different areas. I'm also into the camps of the glass full. You decide how much it is, maybe 60, 50, but it is a lot of positive things seems to be happening out there. So we will not give up. Our interest is here to stay, it seems. That's the last word from me, really. And thanks again. I'm sure we'll go back and talk with you all soon.
Thank you, Dario. Thanks, everybody. Take care.